Our Stigma, Episode 4, Season 1.
Hi, this is Seth Perry. Today's episode mentions overdose death. Check out our show notes for resources if you need help today. Remember, you can always dial 988 if you're in crisis. Before we begin today's episode, I want to give you the questions of the day. Ponder these throughout the episode. Here they are. How welcoming is your community? What faiths and ethnic identities would feel unwelcome in your community? How uncomfortable does this question make you feel? Now let's dive in. The voices you're about to hear are three people in recovery. They all attend meetings in rural Washington County, and a lot of their recovery meetings happen at a rural clubhouse. Those are nonprofit organizations that maintain a building for the purpose of 12-step meetings. Everyone interviewed has no idea what they will be talking about. Here's why we're here. I'm taking this book. I'm putting it face down on this table right here. You do not see the cover of this book. You don't know what's in it. The second thing I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to take this piece of paper, open it up right now, and then read from it. Read into the microphone. Go ahead.
We admitted that we were neglectful of our higher selves and that our lives have become unmanageable. We came to believe that Allah could and would restore us to sanity. We made a decision to submit our will to the will of Allah.
Start at the top, read it out.
We admitted that we were neglectful of our higher selves and that our lives had become unmanageable. We came to believe that Allah could and would restore us to sanity. We made a decision to submit our will to the will of Allah.
One person at the table looks up at me with wide eyes and is a little confused. He laughs and asks who Allah is. Who's Allah? Is that God?
It's a Muslim god. It's a god from the Muslim culture.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you recognize
I do.
Allah as the God from the Muslim culture. Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's your first reaction.
Yeah.
Do you both of you, do you recognize what was just read?
Yes. First, second, and third steps in the 12 steps.
Yeah, first, second, and third.
So let's just think about it for a second.
Mm-hmm.
What would it mean to change the big book? Like to make changes in the big book?
Mm-hmm.
How would that go over in your average AA group if people propose changes to the wording of the 12 steps?
Yeah. You know, if you went to the old timers that meet on at 7 o'clock every Saturday morning and presented that to them, I don't think they would like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think if you're, down in the meetings down here in the cities where there's a lot more cultural stuff,
Yep.
I think people wouldn't bat an eye at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Aren't you curious as to see what the cover of the book is?
I guess. Yeah.
You guess?
Seth, I'm so curious.
You-
I'm jumping out of my seat.
All right, so let's have a look at what the title of the book is.
Okay.
And you can tell me. All right, so the title of the book is Melati Islam, The Path of Peace, Islamic Treatment for Addiction. Okay, it's called Melati Islam, The Path of Peace. It's the Islamic treatment for addictions. So let's say this is in your average clubhouse in rural Washington County.
Mm-hmm.
How would that go over?
Not good.
Not good. Why?
It's not a lot of Islam in Washington County, rural Washington County, I
Okay.
don't think.
Okay, so we made it through the big reveal, and it sounds like I found some people who are relatively open-minded when it comes to the spiritual side of 12-step recovery. Except, many 12-step groups use the Lord's Prayer to end their meetings, many at that 12-step rural clubhouse that I was talking about. And that's something that has always made me feel uncomfortable because I want a culturally and spiritually inclusive space for recovery. So here's one thing I want to talk about then. How do you end every AA meeting? What prayer?
Serenity Prayer or the Lord's Prayer?
Serenity Prayer or the Lord's Prayer. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So most 12-step meetings end with the Lord's Prayer. And do you think that works for everyone?
It's not very inclusive. But I've also been to meetings where they say, if you feel like you want to join us, then join us.
Let's talk about the Lord's Prayer. Most 12-step meetings end with the Lord's Prayer. Do you think that works for everyone, and how do you feel about
Absolutely not.
it? That's unanimous. That was like both of you at the same time.
No, because that is the Lord's Prayer. That is a religious prayer, right? And when they start throwing Our Father and all this in there, like it's just where it came from. Mm-hmm. That's what closes my mind off right away.
So let's just say you're average person who was raised in Islam.
Yep.
You come to a meeting, and then at the end of the meeting, everyone holds hands and prays the Lord's Prayer.
Yep.
I mean, I go to a meeting on Thursday night where they just say, let's hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer, right? A lot of meetings do that.
Yep.
So let's say that person's in that situation. What do you think that would be like for that person?
I think it would be, I don't know, if it was their first meeting and no one knew about them and no one knew what they practiced, anything like that, and that person was really, if they were a newcomer to that meeting, I think they would be pretty uncomfortable with it.
Yeah. All right. So now comes the difficult question. The question I've been anxious about asking. Look, I've been to a few rural 12-step clubhouses. By no means am I saying that they are havens of white supremacy or anything like that, but would I feel comfortable bringing a Muslim that I've developed a interfaith relationship with in recovery to one of these spaces? Well, I would be afraid.
I don't see it that often where someone isn't welcomed, but when I see it not happening, like I'm definitely getting up and say, like, do you have a 24-hour medallion? Do you have that? You know what I mean? Do you have everything you need? You know, you got my number. Like, if it's a female, she's getting with a female. You know what I mean?
Do you have a book? Do you,
Yeah. Let's get you connected, man. Like, let's go.
Yeah, I think there's either love or judgment. You can pick between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so that you gotta pick.
Yep, you either are giving love or you are giving judgment, and you can't give both at the same time. I'd hope we hop off that pedestal, because who are we to say what is right and what is wrong? If we truly follow a higher power, no matter what higher power that may be, we would hop off the pedestal of thinking that we were right and someone else was wrong, and we would take humility in and accept the humility.
These anonymous perspectives give us a glimpse into the religious, ethnic, racial, and cultural divides in the country. However, the people I just spoke to would be the first to tell you that addiction and mental health recovery is a universal struggle. Everyone I just featured relies on the support and perspective of other people. And you heard what they said. No discrimination or prejudice in 12-step recovery. That is at the core of every 12-step group. So the challenge we face in this episode is this. How can we get more churches, more pastors, more mosques, more imams, more communities, and more policymakers in collaboration, dialogue, and advocacy together? I'm Seth Perry, and this is our stigma. Building cultural and religious partnerships isn't easy. It's one thing to say I want to build bridges and close ideological and spiritual gaps, but it's another thing to actually prove that I'm willing to learn and listen. Over the past 10 months, one person in particular has taught me so much about Islamic recovery in the East African community right here in Minnesota. She is a well-known representative of the Somali recovery community here, and she is the one who introduced me to Melati Islam. She provided the book that I used in the introduction to this episode, and I will introduce you to her soon. But first, let's check in with Dr. Steve Delisi and hear his thoughts on culturally specific treatment. When it comes to culturally specific treatment, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells sometimes when I talk about it with people in Christian circles. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's a real stretch to bring up that culturally specific needs of people like Muslim Americans are needed, that Muslim Americans need representation in recovery. And it's hard to convince a group of Christians that that's actually a thing, even. So, why is religious and cultural inclusion important in mental health and addiction treatment?
Well, for me, my faith journey and spiritual walk uh, does open the opportunity to work with individuals from different faith traditions and different spiritual journeys than my own, and recognize and acknowledge that that is no less real for those individuals than my faith walk and spiritual journey. And that is a part of the human experience. And so my direct answer to your question is the reason that it needs to be a part of the treatment and engagement with individuals is because that is the only way that we are having open, honest, and authentic discussions and conversations within the context of the treatment. Otherwise, I am trying to approach that individual in a manner that is not consistent with their core humanity and authentic self. And part of the treatment of mental health in particular is to engage and heal the whole authentic self.
Mm. I'm really happy to hear that from a medical professional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Humanity. It all comes down to our shared humanity. And so that is what brought me to the NIA Recovery Gratitude Dinner. The dinner was a celebration empowering East African and Muslim immigrant communities to break the cycle of substance use disorder. Many people spoke at this dinner, but one person spoke passionately about Somali American history as it relates to mental health and addictions. Hodan Hassan, former member of the Minnesota House of Representatives and mental health clinician, said these powerful words.
This is a new territory for my community. We came from war, famine, refugee. We thought we beat the odds by getting here. And we came here, and there's new battles that we have to fight. There's racism, there's poverty, there is discrimination, there is Islamophobia, there's all sorts of hate and classism and ableism and all of these things that we don't know anything about. America was the dream for many of us, and it's still the dream for many people who want to come here. But what people don't understand is that America has different kind of battles that you have to fight. And our parents are not ready for that. We don't know opioid addiction. We don't know all of this other issues. Even mental health. People don't talk about mental health. I'm a mental health clinician. For many years, I worked in mental health. I remember going 10 years ago, going to mosques and asking the imams, hey, I want to talk about mental health. I want to talk about depression and anxiety and PTSD. And the imam saying that, oh, all those problems are solved by, reading Quran. So we do not want to talk about this. Today we're better. I'm going to say, alhamdulillah, we're doing much better. Our ulama, our Muslim scholars are learning about mental health. They're learning about addiction, and they're coming out and talking about it and educating. But 10 years ago, when I wanted to have this conversation, people didn't want to have this conversation because it was too new, it was too strange and too foreign.
When I hear Hodan Hassan speak, two things stand out. First, I relate to her words about religious leaders. For too long, pastors have been unequipped to address addiction and mental health. Even today, some Christians still believe the Bible alone can cure the struggles that they experience, just like she described with the Quran. And second, I'm reminded of what I've never had to endure. War, famine, racism, or living as a refugee in a new country. And my faith has always been the dominant one wherever I have lived. Hodan shares about how high the stakes are in her community.
For the longest time, it has been that our young kids are dying, and mothers and families are too ashamed to tell people that their son or daughter OD'd in their basement. And they will tell you a 17-year-old or a 19-year-old died of a heart attack. That's not a normal thing. And you ask yourself, okay, how many 19-year-olds can we lose for a heart attack? Or can die in their sleep? What's going on? Our young kids cannot just die. Every weekend we cannot bury a new kid and say that we don't know why they died. A healthy kid who was, doing good in school. A lot of people think about addiction and they think that it's, some kid who ran away from home. No, these are A-straight students who are attending University of Minnesota. Some of them are attending some of the best schools. There's no shame in addiction. If we normalize heart disease and we want people to help people who are having a heart attack, if somebody drops for a heart attack right now, all of us will jump up and down and call 911. It's the same thing. Addiction is a disease, and we can beat it if we work together. Thank you.
Now it's finally time for you to meet our next guest. I've talked about them since the beginning of this episode, and we're going to meet them after this break. Talking about mental health and addiction stigma in faith communities shouldn't stop when the episode ends. That's why Our Stigma is more than just a podcast. It's a conversation starter. If you're a community organizer, faith leader, in recovery, or just passionate about community building, I've got a free resource just for you, the Our Stigma Podcast Educational Curriculum. It's a discussion guide designed to help you lead meaningful dialogue on mental health, recovery, and outreach in your community. You can download the Leader Guide and discussion resource today at www.ourstigma.com. That is www.ourstigma.com. Welcome back. Now, I spoke about our next guest earlier. She is the person who made this entire episode possible. Her name is Farhia Budul. And thanks to her, I was able to attend the gratitude dinner and begin to better understand recovery within the East African community. Farhia is a Somali-American licensed addiction counselor and the founder of the NIA Recovery Initiative. The NIA Recovery Initiative is a recovery community organization, the first in the nation specifically dedicated to serving East African and Muslim communities. And after months of building trust, Farhia agreed to sit down with me and share how her organization is working to support and transform recovery efforts in her community. So I want to imagine like an average Somali American maybe living here in Minnesota, and could you tell me what some of the challenges they might face in their own culture in faith if they are seeking recovery?
Oh, absolutely. I think the biggest one is stigma and shame, especially in early recovery. That is the biggest thing, that stigma and shame, and also reconnecting with their faith and their spirituality.
Let's say you spent maybe 4 or 5, even 10 years in active addiction. Why is it difficult then to reconnect to culture and faith if you've been using?
Oh my God. There's a lot of factors in that. One is because shame tells us that I'm a bad person and I have been sinning, and I've been committing sin for a long time. So why would anybody love me? I'd rather just continue to do what I was doing, what was thought was working for me, right? So the idea of coming back is scary at first. And then also the faith aspect, there's so many barriers between the person and God. And in order to remove those barriers, one has to start the repenting process. in order to kind of free themselves from the guilt, the shame, the trauma, all of that. So the person is going to have a hard time.
So for myself, like, I can say as a Christian, I felt that, right? Someone who was raised Christian, I stepped away from my faith and then I ended up back in church, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was something where within me, as someone who has a dual diagnosis, I have a mental health condition, have addiction disorder. I didn't feel necessarily like I immediately fit in right away when I got back. And it took a while, and I mean years and years, for me to feel like I fit back in my faith community. So how is that parallel to your experience and the experience of other people in your community? What is it specifically that has to do with Islam and maybe even the Somali culture here that stigmatizes addiction and mental illness?
Yeah, great question. So in my experience, I too had a dual diagnosis. I was struggling with depression and anxiety and a lot of other things that, along with substance use disorders. So the first time I went to treatment, I didn't have a relationship with God. I didn't have a healthy relationship with anybody in my family. So when I did get out of treatment, and this is the first time, right? I did what everybody does when they get out of treatment to try to find recovery. They go to AA meetings or 12-step support meetings. And that was my way of like reconnecting. And one thing that the 12-step support groups did for me was they reminded me of God, even though it wasn't the same God that we were talking about, because they were talking about this higher power concept of, hey, this is, turn your will over. And I'm thinking, well, I'm a Muslim. I've been sinning my whole life. How do I reconnect with God? And then the very people that I thought were supposed to help me turned their backs on me because I wasn't wearing a hijab. I wasn't dressed in the cultural appropriate clothing. And so I was a little bit confused. So what did I do? I rebelled back and started a relapse because I didn't have that support. So, and that is what we're seeing today. How I was able to get out of that cycle of relapsing was the first time I surrendered. And for folks in my community, so Islam tells us it's a sin to drink alcohol, to do drugs, and to even come to prayer while you're intoxicated. Honestly, if you do drink alcohol, your prayer is not accepted for 40 days. But you have to still continue to pray because we want to see that effort. God wants to see the effort that you're putting in. So imagine that, and you've been sinning for how many years, right? The idea is that when someone needs help, we want to be there, regardless of how long they have been there, how long they've been using or not. The culture is where a lot of the stigma comes from. It doesn't come from the religion of Islam. Islam tells us that it's a peaceful religion. Islam means submission to Allah. A Muslim means submission to Allah, and Islam is peace. So we know that God is most merciful. He's compassionate. He's understanding. He is all seeing. He's all hearing. So it's the people that make it really hard. It's the culture of Somali culture that stigmatizes people, that reshames them, that puts them down, and we don't do enough of loving the person and making sure that they come back.
What are the boundaries and barriers that people encounter in terms of finding treatment and finding acceptance outside of their culture?
For me, a lot of non-Somalis supported me, and I went through the whole process of getting a sponsor, trying to reconnect with who I was and understanding all of that. Recovery is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of barriers. There is the lack of family support. First of all, let's get there. The lack of family support. And what I mean by that is, if the individual's family members do not understand what's at stake, they're going to lose themselves in the process to trying to enable this person, to try to fix this person, to try to get them to not use drugs and alcohol. And they're going to miss out on how to support the person wholeheartedly. And then also do that family component of like, the whole family is supposed to be in recovery together, right? So that doesn't happen because there's a lot of misinformation of like, oh, if he wanted to stop, if she wanted to stop, she would. But we know that's not true. You know, there's countless times where I was like, I'm done. I don't want to use. And then I pick up. You know, but when I said I wanted to stop, I meant it. But then I don't know what happened to get me to pick up again. It's the addiction. It's that disorder piece, that dis-ease that we talk about. So they don't understand. So there's a lot of lack of family education and understanding about what substance use disorder is. So then there's the other component of this young person has been using behind their parents' back. If the parents don't know, they've probably been in and out of jail. The parents still don't know. And then comes that one day, because, you know, whatever is done in the dark comes to the light. So then the family finds out, and the family kicks the person out into the streets. Or then we have the other flip side, when families like, come back home, we want you home. And the person is like, no, I already built a community in the encampments, the unsheltered population. Now I built that community and I want to be out in the streets. But they got a warm bed at home. That doesn't make sense, right? Then there is this component of a lot of people from the cultural responsive side and the deen aspect. So deen is a way of life. Islam is a way of life. There's not enough counselors in treatment centers that understand that. There's a lack of culturally responsive treatment centers that really helps the person to understand holistically how to recover. And then I want to say this last thing, the lack of support from our imams, our faith leaders, the mosques. We want to integrate people back into the masjid and the mosques, and a lot of imams say no. They close the door because we don't want to help those people. They're going to infect these young people at the mosque. So they rather not help them. So that's what we're seeing right now, a crisis.
The statistics show us that people of color are disproportionately at risk for a fatal overdose.
And when you think about that, the overdose is people that have just graduated from treatment. Like they came out and they had a relapse and they had a bad hit and they relapsed and they died. And a lot of people don't understand and that many treatment centers are calling themselves recovery programs. And we need to stay away from that kind of language. Treatment is treatment. Mm-hmm. Recovery happens in the community. That's where recovery really truly happens when you really think about it. And that's where we need to put more resources in. We need to have more peer recovery support. How do you help somebody who's been in and out of treatment their whole life and now finally they come out and you want to work with them? But the treatment centers are like having a fit about it because they're not referring people to RCOs. The RCOs and the treatment centers need to do a better job of working together. And let's not even talk about prevention because prevention is not happening anywhere in the metro area. Mm-hmm. When we talk about who's telling kids today not to do drugs? When I was growing up, I'm sure you know, and we talked about this before, we had that DARE program.
Yes.
At least it was telling people, young kids, not to do drugs, right? But right now, when you really think about it, nobody is telling young kids not to do fentanyl, not to do drugs, not to do vaping. We need more prevention efforts. Then you talk about treatment. It's really important to connect that individual before they leave a treatment center. We need to get a peer recovery specialist in there so that they can start working with the peer recovery specialist.
Before they even leave treatment.
Before they even leave treatment. A lot of people are going back out to the same people, places, and situations. They relapse, and then the same treatment center that just discharged them admits them right back into treatment. Mm-hmm. We've been doing a lot of outreach, and when we also do targeted outreach for our community members who may feel like they're alone. A lot of the work that we're doing has just been that outreach and awareness and education. How do you reduce that stigma and shame? And most importantly, how do you recover out loud? Because when I recover out loud, I am telling people who I am, where I've come from, and I'm also showing up for myself, and I'm also showing up for my community. So recovering out loud looks like this. Hey, I'm Farhia Budul, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. What that means to me is that I can show up for myself, my family, and my community. Recovery has truly given me back my values and my traditions. And when I say that out loud and I put that out, that energy out, magic happens. Mm-hmm. People start reaching out. Oh my God, I struggle too. Oh my God, you're a hijabi and you're talking about recovery, because it's the most taboo thing that anybody can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I went through seminary. I studied. I became a pastor. I became ordained, and it took me years before I could say, look, I'm in recovery. So that's only 2 years ago where I said, I'm a pastor. I have bipolar disorder. I'm in recovery, right? And then other people started to say, yeah, I'm going to recover out loud as well, right?
That's great.
And
yeah.
that's the moment that we are in right now, to continue to invite people to do that in their faith communities, right?
For me, it's when I started to not care about what other people think about me. Mm-hmm. That's when I got my power back.
Yeah. After speaking with Farhia, one question kept coming to mind. How? How can more culturally specific treatment become available? That's why I'm back at the state capitol asking Jeremy Drucker, Minnesota's director of the Office of Addiction and Recovery, the following question. So here's a tough question, because the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion are bound to culturally specific addiction and mental health treatment. And in my discussion with folks outside of my rural white bubble, I would say, people from Indigenous, Hmong, LGBTQ, East African, and African American communities, those communities are asking for more culturally specific treatment options that affirm their identities. So considering how the United States federal government is no longer really prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, how are you and Governor Tim Walz going to ensure that these vital programs not only continue but expand in their reach?
So I really truly believe that our most effective programs are, and the way to help people best and to get the best outcomes are having truly person-centered care. And to sort of paraphrase Whitman, I am not one thing, I contain multitudes. And I believe that we all as people have multiple different types of identities. We have geographic identities, ethnic identities, economic identities, and that the most effective programs are programs that meet people where they are, who they are, no matter what their identity is, whether they're a hockey player in Hermantown or a Somali youth in Cedar Riverside or a Hmong individual on the east side. We need programs that meet people where they are, because those programs are going to be more effective. That means their people are going to get better treatment. It means they're going to move along their recovery journey faster. It means they're going to live more purpose-filled, self-directed lives where they're going to get jobs and be tax-paying citizens, and it makes good economic sense for everyone. And so I really think that one of the things that we're going to continue to do with the state of Minnesota is support those programs that are truly person-centered. We have certain pieces in our state programs for culturally specific providers. I think we're going to continue to do those things. We're going to continue to encourage a diverse workforce so that we have a behavioral health workforce that looks like the clients we're serving, so that there's enough Hmong behavioral health practitioners and Somali behavioral health practitioners that we're supporting things like traditional healing that we know work very well for our Indigenous neighbors and fellow Minnesotans. And we're going to do all of those things, and we're going to continue to do them because they work, and ultimately they're going to save the state of Minnesota money down the road.
For us to understand programs that meet people where they are at, we need to talk to someone who has benefited from culturally specific treatment, and also someone who is now qualified to provide culturally specific treatment. And we're going to do that right after this. The Our Stigma podcast is produced by Good Faith Media, a reliable resource contributing to conversations at the intersection of faith and culture. My friends at Good Faith Media use multiple media platforms. Their flagship podcast is Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. Each week, the co-hosts discuss current events and issues, engage the lighter side, and interview faith leaders from around the world. Learn more about the podcast and the nonprofit Good Faith Media at goodfaithmedia.org. Welcome back. In order for you to see how culturally specific treatment works, I want to introduce you to someone who has found recovery through involvement with NIA Recovery. This is Kaleab Woldegiorgis, and here is his story.
My parents never approved of my use. I grew up in an Ethiopian household, so I think they drank once a year about a glass of wine. If you drank too much coffee, they would look at you as someone with a serious problem of addiction, that you need to curb your habit and figure out what's wrong with you. So I can say with confidence that they definitely did not approve of my use. They threw away liquor that I had, weed. If I had friends over, they'd kick them out. Totally not approved of it. Didn't have to do with school or something, productive like that. They didn't want to see me around it. I obviously rebelled against that, and I found ways to use. I was out of control, and they couldn't help me, even though they tried. They had brought in, in our culture, if your kids are having trouble in life and they're just not listening to what you're saying, they seem to be going in a direction that it's not going to lead to anything good. You call in somebody that's elder, an elder in the family, like a grandpa, grandma, something like that, and you have them talk to the kid, someone that's outside of the immediate family, the nuclear family. So they brought in a few elders, and they were like, "Kaleab, what's going on with you? What is all this stuff that I'm hearing?" In a different language, obviously, which kind of hits you in a, I don't know if it's because it's my native tongue, but it kind of hits you,
And so that's Amharic?
Yeah, Amharic. Yeah. So they'd speak to me in Amharic, and, actually, it kind of annoyed me. It bugged me because at the time I didn't believe I was addicted, that there wasn't really anything. I don't know why you're here talking to me about this. I'm not the one that's being weird about this. It's them. Like, everybody's smoking weed. Everybody's drinking. Mm-hmm. This is just the way that things are, and they need to just figure out that, if they make my life less hard by approving of my use, my use will be better for me and them. You can kind of see what a selfish kind of point of view that is. Mm-hmm. I'm over 18. I'm living in their house, eating their food, driving their car,
mm-hmm.
Crashing their car.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then going, no, it's not a problem. Mm-hmm. We were already kind of a closed off family, but my addiction and what the fear that they had about what would happen if this was let out, my conduct, they didn't want to be judged by the community at large. And so once I was going to jail and stuff like that, they didn't even have a say anymore. They were much in the same condition that I was in, because I went to jail and then I thought I would have a say over what would happen, but then I didn't. The court did. You're going to treatment. After you complete treatment, you're going to, follow all rules, become a law-abiding citizen.
Kaleab speaks about how he's been able to share his message of recovery in his mother tongue. So when I saw you on Instagram speaking about recovery in Amharic,
yeah,
why is that so significant to you to do that?
Well, I wanted to do that because I had never done that. And so I think it's important to do that just so that people in different circles hear you and they can hear message of hope and help, right? So whether it's like a mom, a dad, or a grandpa that's trying to figure out why their son, daughter, cousin, uncle, whatever, what's going on with them and how can they help them, right? If they hear somebody that's speaking a language that they speak, if they hear somebody that's in the culture, right, that's going to understand like some of these nuances that you don't have time to talk about, that you're just supposed to come prepared understanding. Like that's going to just help someone be able to just make that jump to be able to call someone and say, hey, I really need help. I saw your post, and yeah, for sure. The other part, I guess the second part is just for those that are suffering from the addiction. So if it's someone that was Ethiopian that spoke Amharic that is suffering from addiction, right? And they're like, nobody gets me, nobody gets my struggles, nobody understands what it's like to live in a 2-language household or 2-culture household. There I am, right? If I'm speaking the language fluently, if I'm speaking the language in a way that makes sense to them, and they can understand, I don't have to explain a whole lot of stuff, and they don't have to explain a whole lot of stuff to me. Like, it just makes it more accessible for them to reach out.
Earlier in this series, I mentioned the term peer recovery specialist, and that's what Kaleab is certified as. Peer recovery specialists use their lived experience with addiction, mental health, or both, along with specialized training to support others in recovery. Many people believe that only doctors or counselors or therapists can help build a foundation for healing, but Kaleab's story shows us just how powerful peer support can be. It opens up the opportunity for recovery for someone who may be struggling.
For sure.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just about that, making it accessible, letting people know that it's out there available.
Yeah, and it worked for me. It's just that there were prominent voices and people out there that looked like me. Right?
Sure.
That's why I can relate to it. But I just think in the 15 years that I've been clean, the cultural side of recovery has developed where we're at a point where having better representation for a therapeutic purpose, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And right, that's important because you see a lot of advertising or marketing around recovery, but you don't really see a whole lot of diverse marketing around it. And so you got to reach, every niche, every nook and every corner. And to do that, you got to have people that represent the culture, the lived experience. When I first went into treatment, like 2011, 2012, these services weren't available to us. There was no peer recovery, and there was a whole host of other things that you can use to help you in your recovery. This time around, when I came into recovery, I moved to Minneapolis. People were, giving me advice about how to attain different, how to achieve some of my goals that I had. And they said, maybe you should consult a peer recovery specialist. And so I got one myself, and I talked to him. I said, hey, man, right now I've got a few things afflicting me. I've got a criminal record that goes back some years. It's kind of holding me back from being able to be financially independent and useful to myself and my family and others. And right now I don't even have a job, and I don't even know where to start looking. So, these are the things that I would like help with, right? Because these are the things that I lost in addiction. So that was my first introduction to peer recovery. I started attending meetings with NIA. I became useful. I was doing a lot of service work. They decided to make that a more formal role. And so they were like, would you like to be a peer recovery specialist? So I took the offer, took the training, and then became certified.
Mm-hmm. Another powerful part of Kaleab's recovery has been his spiritual journey, which is partly guided by NIA recovery. And for this podcast, he's chosen to share about it in a general way. How has your spiritual journey unfolded since you entered recovery?
It has unfolded in a variety of ways, just little at a time, but always with kind of the same underlying message, which is that good is good, bad is bad, right? We're living the same life, trying to conduct ourselves as good human beings, good stewards of the land, productive and contributing members of society. And so my spirituality just kind of, what it has is it's let me embrace my past. I used to be ashamed of it, and I think that also kind of coincided with wanting to rekindle this love affair I had with drugs and alcohol, where it was just a toxic relationship, and drugs and alcohol never did me any good, and it just mistreated me, and I never saw that, and I would always go back thinking that it was going to be different, right? My spiritual journey is now, I'm not ashamed of that. I am embracing that, and I'm embracing it because it's good for me and it's good for others.
When Kaleab shares his spiritual journey in recovery, it's clear how he strives to live with good intentions. Fittingly, on this episode's center on Islam and the Nia Recovery Initiative, we truly get an experience of the meaning of the word Nia, the Arabic word for intention or purpose behind action. You also can feel the essence of Nia at the gratitude dinner, especially when listening to Farhia as she thanks everyone who attended.
I know firsthand what it's like to struggle with substance use disorder. I know what it feels like to carry the weight of shame, to sit in silence, to feel invisible in spaces where healing should have been available but was not. I know the stigma that stings, both from community and from the outside. But I also know the power of redemption and transformation, alhamdulillah. I know the sweetness of coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after being lost in the dark. I know what's possible when intention, faith, and action come together. I know you all have planted seeds before. How long has it been when you planted a seed and you've seen it grow? Like, look at this room tonight. Alhamdulillah. You are all a living proof that Allah's mercy is deeper than any darkness that we have known. Nia recovery isn't just about sobriety. It's about returning to our fitrah, our natural state. It's about realigning with our purpose. It's about reclaiming our connection to Allah, to ourselves, and to our ummah, the people. It's about creating culturally competent, safe, faith-centered, trauma-informed recovery spaces, because we deserve spaces that fully align with our deen and how we speak through our healing. And wallahi, we did not get here alone. Thank you so much for believing in me and in my vision and for walking with us on this journey. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
As the crowd rose to their feet, showing heartfelt gratitude for Farhia's work, the moment felt electric. People from across the recovery community joined together in applause. Yet, within days of the Nia Recovery Initiative Gratitude Dinner, a major blow hit. Billions in federal funding for substance use, behavioral health, and mental health services were frozen. Recovery community organizations, public treatment centers, and mental health services now face painful decisions and service disruptions. When I think about how these cuts will ripple outward, I worry. Who will lose their chance at recovery? Who will be left on the streets? And that's where we'll pick up next episode, as we turn our focus to the unhoused. Our Stigma is a production of Good Faith Media. This episode was produced by Cliff Vaughn at Good Faith Media, with support from Mitch Randall and Callie Chisholm. Audio provided by Pond 5. Special thanks to Farhia Budul and the Nia Recovery Initiative for their collaboration and trust. Thanks also to everyone who was interviewed and contributed to this episode. Dr. Steve Delisi, Hodan Hassan, Jeremy Drucker, Kaleab Woldegiorgis, and Farhia Budul. I also want to thank the organizations whose support made this episode possible. Thank you to the Nia Recovery Initiative for having me at the Gratitude Dinner. It was an amazing time. Thank you to M Health Fairview, Washington County, and Elam Lutheran Church for their financial support and just their support in general. I'm Seth Perry, the host, writer, and creator of Our Stigma. If you found this episode meaningful, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. It truly helps others find the show. Visit ourstigma.com to explore the educational discussion series that accompanies this podcast. See you for episode 5.